Hello, and welcome to Chapter 9. Uh, First of all, let me just excuse myself. I got just a bit of a frog in my throat and a little nasally, got a bit of a cold. So we'll get through this, but that's probably why my voice sounds a little strange. With that said, this entire term, this entire semester, we've been talking about research, of course, as a research methods class, and how research is essentially analyzing data. We've talked about qualitative data we gather through interviews or focus group. We've talked about quantitative data that we get from surveys and we can turn numeric. And we've talked about experimental research last week where we are manipulating variables and things like that. But today, this week, this chapter, chapter 9, we're going to talk about secondary data. And secondary data is going to be a little bit of a new animal. Secondary data is data that we are using as researchers, but we didn't collect it. Data that's already been collected that we're just going to use. Somebody did the hard work for us. They collected all that data, and then they just published it elsewhere in a database. Sometimes those are researchers, sometimes those are government agencies or nonprofit agencies. Somebody somewhere has collected a whole bunch of data, put it out there for folks to use, sometimes free, sometimes you have to pay for it. And then we use that data in our own research. So instead of using our own gathered data, we're using somebody else's data. That could be for examples could be NCVS, the National Crime Victimization Survey, or UCR, the Uniform Crime Reporting. Those are databases, surveys, groups of data that are collected by the government, the DOJ and the FBI, respectively. They put out these surveys to crime victims in the NCVS, and they ask them a whole bunch of questions about being a victim of a crime, and then that's available for folks to use. Or the UCR, the FBI will contact local law enforcement agencies and get all their crime statistics, and that's available for folks to use. Alternatively, we could here at the University of Kansas, we could go to Douglas County Sheriff's or Lawrence PD ourselves and request permission and get or request approval to use their crime data ourselves without going through the UCR, the FBI's UCR. One of the things that makes secondary data a little bit more desirable than collecting our own data is the fact that one, there's no human subjects. If we're not asking people questions, we're not doing focus groups, we're not doing interviews, we're not interacting or manipulating variables of folks or with participants. Since we're not interacting with people, we have no human subjects. So our IRB application, remember the Institutional Review Board we talked about at the beginning of the semester that deals with the ethics and making sure people are treated correctly and treated fairly. Well, if you're not interacting with people, you're going to fly through your IRB approval because there's really nothing for them to approve. Uh, on the other side, on the flip side of things, conversely, some of the downsides of secondary data, one is the fact that the data is only as good as the person who collects it. So if we don't know who collected it, we just have to trust that it's good, and maybe later we find out it wasn't validly collected, and maybe we have some issues with the study that we published. Secondarily, we can't use secondary data in general to be experimental. Last week we talked about the chapter 8 talks about the fact that if you want to manipulate variables and say, okay, this group is going to do this, while this group is going to do this, and let's see which one is affected differently. We can't do that because the data's already been collected, it already exists. All we can do is just go through the spreadsheets and see what variables exist. So if we wanted to study already collected data, secondary data of officers who are involved in shootings on duty, yeah, we could look at the comparison of officers by race, by age, by how long they've been on the job, but we can't change any of those variables. It's already been collected. Sometimes you find out that maybe there's a question you wanted to ask, and that was never asked by the original data collector. Maybe you want to find out, you want to compare the officers who are involved in a shooting by age. Are younger officers more prone to get involved than older officers in shootings? Well, if you look at your database, hypothetically, what if the person who's collecting the data on OAS has just never asked anybody's age? Well, now you can't use that data for the question that you want to use it for. You can always go back and collect your own data but then it's no longer secondary data. It's your data. And when you collect the data, you can ask any question you want, all the questions you want. And then maybe you can make that data available for other people to use secondarily. But once it's already collected and it's already published, the questions are questions that have already been asked. You can't go back and re-ask them without reopening that data collection and having to go to IRB because now you're interacting with humans and now you have human subject treatment you need to deal with. So with all that said, I hope that kind of clears up some of the secondary data questions that you had, and I look forward to seeing this week's submissions. Rock chalk.